Sorry about that, battery died. All right, so we've got our practice board. Not to toot my own horn, but come out pretty good. And again, I've welded, I've soldered before, nothing extensively. So a little bit of practice came back to me. I got Bardwell on the tablet. And I'm literally watching his video and building the quad. So I just took out, looks like the top and bottom, possibly mid. It's got press nuts. I don't know if you can see that. Here are the arms. They come in these cool vacuum seal packs. I wouldn't suggest just trying to open it. You could probably break something or stress it. Just get yourself some scissors. That's those two things. Put that there for now. We got those. We're probably going to need the bottom part, or is this the camera? I think this is where the camera goes. There's nothing else in there. This looks like for what holds the arms. There's nothing else in there. We've got a bunch of different screws. This is a battery. It's like a rubber thing with a sticky back so the battery doesn't slide. It's like GoPro mount. And these should be the standoffs. I believe that's what they're called. Little metal like support columns, if you will. Okay, there's nothing else in there. Save that there for now. All right, so we got some arms. We got a top, a mid. I don't know what that's for. It's just hanging out to the side there. Got a press nut here. I'm assuming that's the front because it says Lumenier. It's got his little initial there, JB. Bunch of press nuts. Top plate, I'm guessing. Standoffs. They all look the same size. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so in his video, his first playlist had the original that didn't have this metal arm thing. It had like a carbon fiber X brace. So I had to find the second one for his updated that has this. He says in the video it might come assembled here. It didn't, but that's okay. It's too easy. We're looking for bag of screws. Depending which way you're holding it, it's going to be either the second one the top or the bottom. And if you look here, it says it's an M3 by 16 millimeter screw. You come to your list, M3 by 16 millimeter screw. There's only 2 of them. Also, what I noticed, it's the only ones that have like this square head. The other ones are a little rounded, and they're just not the same, right? They're just different. So this is where we're at. Does come with some instructions here. These 4 long ones. Or is it these 4 long ones? I wish these were labeled so it would be easier, kind of like, you know, IKEA, like, hey, this one's this one's that. Even if they just stuck a little piece of paper in there saying, hey, this is that bunch of screws, it might be easier for somebody who's done this before. They kind of know what they do. But part of Bardwell's entire thing is he's got so much knowledge. He helps beginners like me. So just I don't know, handy bit of info maybe. You know, they've been doing it so long. It's something that to them it might they're not overlooking it because they just have so much knowledge and experience. They just, you know, gloss over it. But from a total newbie, that would help. I'm trying to see if maybe it's listed somewhere else, or did I miss something that had that there? All right, let's see what he says. Okay. So what he says is find the longest screws. So this is the second one from the bottom or the top, depending which way. And they're the longest screws. They're there. So we're taking the plate that has the JB little initials on it, and those go on the bottom. And there's this little groove right in here. So you could tell this X plate or something, that is where that goes. So we're gonna put these in here, and the outside most screw. Yeah. Okay, I mean, we're getting there.
You should have something that looks like this. Make sure that you've installed the X plate with the little wedges facing the sides and not the front and back. Next, we're going to use our 2.
Wait a minute. All right, so he's told us to go ahead and drive these down. For me, it was a 2 millimeter. That's what fits here. So we're just gonna run these home. I don't know if these are the best set. I got it off of Amazon. It works. It was like $10, $20, something like that. I don't know if they're the best. This is legit the first part of a drone I've ever built right here. So I'm just gonna run these home. Not, you know, There's finger tight there, I'm assuming. I don't even know if this is in the shot. I apologize if it's not. Okay, it's there. So yeah, we're just running this home. If you're building this, I suggest just do like I'm doing. I'm literally got the tablet going, pausing it as I'm going, and then just following along with the steps. Like, he definitely has lots and lots of information. It's very useful for newbies like myself. Okay, just a little finger tight, not wrenching down on them. All right, let's see what he says.
0.5 millimeter driver, and we're going to loosen up these wedges, and we're going to insert the arms. And the arms go in like so. Need to loosen it up even more. Arms go in like so. What I can do is I can take two of the arms and kind of wedge them in. And then once they are sort of wedged in there, I can just kind of...
Okay, hold on a second. Is this the same size? We need a 2.5 for this. Yeah. Okay, so this part is a 2.5. Not sure why it's... whatever. Doesn't make a difference. And those are definitely not. But that definitely is. Okay, so the way he showed it is we put an arm, let's loosen this more, I guess. Okay, so we slide this, oops. Okay, that's in. And then that's in, and he kind of just tighten that down a little bit, just enough to hold the arms. Is that right, Joshua?
I'm going to tighten that down a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Until they kind of are held in place. Don't tighten it all the way. We'll do that later. And the result should look something like this.
Hang on,
Make
movie
sure
magic.
that
Movie magic over here. Hang tight. All right, we got this side here. Nope, that goes that way. Okay, so these could still pop out. All right, let's see what he says now.
each of these 4 screw holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, lines up with the corresponding screw hole in the mid plate. Next, we're going to take this piece, which is called the bottom plate, and I want you to notice that there is this little channel milled into it here. That channel is going to go up against the X plate. It provides room for the screw head to go in.
Makes sense.
The bottom plate is going to mount like so, and you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 screw holes that will line up, and screws will go through the arms, as well as 1 central screw hole that's going to go here in the X plate. I think that the easiest way to do this is to take this little short screw, which goes through the center hole.
Okay, hang on, Mr. Bardwell. So it takes an M3 by 6 millimeter. We have 4 of them. Huh. We only have 1 of these.
And install it first. And just loosely install that. And you can see that we've also got room to manipulate the stack screws here, so that if we need to maintain the flight control stack or take those screws out for some reason, we can do that. There is this little channel.
Hold on. Okay, so that is for the GoPro. It's 13 of those. See, but it doesn't tell me which screw is which. Man, I really wish they labeled them here, because like I'm playing a freaking guessing game now. These are so tiny. These are M2 4mm screws. Okay, well we're just gonna, because those are the tiniest ones there. We're just gonna leave those off to the side. I think 1, 2, 3, 4 M3 by 6 millimeter, and it's telling me to put an M3 by 6 here, but there's 5 holes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm assuming these are super tiny. Okay, so I have this it kind of like the heads come off and you can switch them. Don't do that. Don't do that. You gotta be kidding me. That's 1.5. And that's too small. You've got to be shitting me.
milled into it here. That channel is going to go up against the X plate. It provides room for the screw head to go in. The bottom plate is going to mount like so, and you're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4 screw holes that will line up, and screws will go through the arms, as well as one central screw hole that's going to go here in the X plate. I think that the easiest way to do this is to take this little short screw, which goes through the center hole, and install it first. And just loosely install that. And you can see that...
Okay, wait. These screws are different. But there was 4 of them. So that makes me think... M3 by 6 millimeters, 4 of those. There's 13 of those. And that one looks round. So I'm assuming it is these ones here. Shit. That did not go to plan. Don't do that. Okay, Google, continue. Hold on. Okay, I found them all. And so, I don't know if you could really see it, but these heads, they're like roundish. But supposedly it's the same size of these, but this has like a flat head. So we're not using the flathead ones. Okay, well, at least this fits. I don't know what those 4 screws are for, but I don't have anything that'll fit that. Which doesn't make sense because this is a 1.5. And this is a 2, and they don't fit either of them. Two is too big, and the 1.5 is too small, so. It says do the center one first. Okay, it's on, but it's barely on. It could still move. Everything could still move, but it's lined up. So let's see what he says.
We've also got room to manipulate the stack screws here, so that if we need to maintain the flight control stack or take those screws out for some reason, we can do that.
Okay.
Without disassembling the whole thing. So we'll just loosely install that center screw.
It's loose.
And then we'll have these screws, which are going to go...
Hold on. We got the standoffs. M3 by 6 millimeter. That's all of these that I just took out. M3 by 16 should be okay. If they're the rounded ones, that's these. 4. The other one were 2, and those went into the side. I'm going to say these are M3 by 8. Okay, I'm almost positive it's these 4 right here. So we have M3 by 16. We got 4 of those. What size is this? A 1.5 or is that a 2? 2. Okay, we got 4 of these. And we're going to need 4 of these, I think. And we're going to need our offsets. For this step. We don't need this for this step, but we do need these. Okay, from what it looks like, the small M3 by 6 millimeter are going to go here, and here, and the bigger M3 by 16 are going to go here, nope, got it wrong. This is going to go up here, and then these slots, it gets a small screw. Then behind that here, gets an offset and a big screw. Then here gets another offset and a big screw. And then back here gets a small screw and offsets. Okay, I think this is what we're working with on this step.
Through this hole, and they're going to go through the bottom plate, through the arm, and through the mid plate all together. And they're going to be held in by a standoff. This is a standoff. It is threaded, and it will thread on. And again, you don't need to tighten it down super tight, but it'll thread on and sort of hold that together. Go ahead and do all 4 of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly like that. At this point, here's what we've got. The base of the quadcopter frame is basically...
Okay. I see what he's saying. So that's lined up. One. So they're basically, these long ones are going to go through that hole where the arm goes, right? So these are part of the arm holders. And I like that it's a little tight. It's just not like sliding through there. I'm actually having to screw it in, even though there's really nothing to screw it in. And then this one here. Take one more. So basically we took these long M3 by 16 and it was 1, 2, 3 right here. Makes 4. Just making sure this is lined up because this is giving me the most resistance. Okay. So I'm having to screw mine all the way in, even though it's okay, so that's what we got so far. I believe this is the front. I believe this is the rear. No, I lied to you. This is the front. This is the rear. So these little slots, I feel are gonna go something to that nature. That actually lines up. And I believe it's the small one that goes there. Let's double check. And I believe the other standoffs go back here. Go ahead, Mr. Bardwell. Hey.
Completely assembled. We've got the bottom plate, the arms, and the mid plate all joined together with the X plate in the center holding the arms in. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws on the bottom. We've got 4 stack screws sticking up through and protruding out, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 standoffs installed. Next, we're going to install the motors, and I want you to notice that the motors come with a set of screws and a nut. The nut is called a prop nut, and it's used to hold the propeller onto the motor.
Sir, you started with these, all right? And step number 4 even states to put it in.
And what I like to do, just to keep from losing it, is I will go ahead and thread that on to the motor. Right now, just thread it on until you feel it start to grab a little bit. It has a little nylon insert to help keep it from backing off.
Okay. Mr. Know-It-All says do this. Let's go ahead and do that. I did open this already, so kind of saw what was here. Let's go ahead and do like he says. We're just gonna put this nut on there. Feel a little snug. I want to see, does this fit? Oh, mine doesn't fit. What in the world? Whatever set this was from Amazon, don't get that. I guess I'm gonna have to go back online to get a better set. Hold on. So in this step number 4, it says to install these. And but in the video, he's moving on to the motors, and he hasn't installed the last standoffs or the camera mount. So I'm just gonna follow along and see if he has some sort of reasoning for this down the line. Now he's saying just to put the nut on the motor so you don't lose it, which I also don't understand, because they come individually packaged with the hardware individually packaged as well. But what do I know? And he knows it all. So I just put all the screws in here, which I'm assuming are going to go on the here. And I put all the nuts on the motor, not all the way, just it's a lock nut, so you got that little nylon or whatever plastic in there. So as soon as I just felt it, I left it. Boom. Let's see what he has to say.
So if you just screw it down until you feel a little tension, it should be pretty secure.
Okay.
The screws you should be extremely suspicious of.
Sure.
And the reason I say that is because these screws happen to be the perfect length for these arms and this motor. If you take a look at the motor base and the screw, you can see that the screw is, actually that screw could be longer. It actually isn't going to go all the way up through the motor base, but it'll get a few threads into the motor base, and it'll hold and that's fine. But the problem is that the motor manufacturer doesn't know how thick the arms of your quadcopter frame are. So when the motor manufacturer decides the correct length of screw to send, they have no idea if that's correct, so they just guess. And the problem is that if the screws are too short, then they just won't go into the motor and they won't grab, and then your motor might like come off in flight, which of course would be bad. But if the screws are too long, they will protrude up through the motor base and they will dig into these wires, the windings of the motor, and damage, basically destroy the motor. They can also, on some motors, come up and they can dig in here into these wires where they exit the copper windings. So whenever you're installing your motors on your quadcopter, you're going to want to check, just like I did. Stick the screw up through the arm, and then hold the motor next to the screw and look at how far the screw protrudes into the motor. And if the screw protrudes up above the motor base by more than like 0.5 millimeter, then you should consider using a different set of screws, or you could use washers to kind of space the screw down so that it doesn't stick up. In your case though, you do not need to use the screws that come with the motors because the JB QAVS comes with a set of screws that are sized exactly right for its arms.
Okay, so that answers that. Let's see what he says.
So you're going to want to look in your frame kit, find the set of screws. They're going to look pretty much like this, except might not be the exact same length, but they're going to be cap head screws just like this. There's going to be 16 of them, 4 per motor, and those are going to be what you're going to use to mount the motors on your frame. The best way to mount the motor on the frame is to put one screw in, line up the base of the motor, and then just
3, 4, 3, 4. Okay, so we're using these ones. Do like he said, we're gonna check those out. Okay, so I just did this with the screws that came with the motor, and they didn't go as far. So we got one. Let's try another one. And let's see. I need better lighting in here. Having to do this, stupid. Do not get a set like this. Okay, I'm checking in between. I think it's kind of hard to see. But in between there, I'm making sure it's not poking out and actually touching the motor. And they're tight. I mean, obviously I didn't like wrench down on them, but they're snug, they're tight. So we're not using the screws that came with the motors. But it's probably a good idea to save them because screws. All right, I'm gonna do that to the rest of them. All right, I got the motors on. Got the wires all running. And what he said next is get the ESC. So here's the ESC. It says ESC on the bottom there. It's very small. See what he says.
The ESC has a top and a bottom. You are currently looking at the bottom. The top is this side with all the copper solder pads on. That side needs to be facing up. Here in the four corners of the ESC are the mounting holes, and those mounting holes have in them silicon, we call them gummies. I don't know why we call them that. They are for vibration and shock isolation to help protect the ESC from being damaged in a crash. In mine, the gummies are already installed. Installing the gummies is a pain in the butt, and most flight controllers and ESCs come with the gummies loose in a bag, and you have to install them. I'm gonna guess at some point in the future, someone watching this video will receive an ESC or flight controller with the gummies not installed yet, so I'm going to take one out and show you. Oh my God, they've done the right thing. Yay! Okay, so this ESC has a little cutout here, which makes installing the gummies super easy. Fantastic, just slide them in there. Well, maybe based on that, at some point in the future, they will keep doing that at the factory instead of going, F it, that's too hard, and sending them to you loose. If your gummies are not installed, go ahead and install them. And then with the solder pads facing up, we're going to identify the front of the quadcopter, which is the side with these two little slits in it. Take my word for it, that's the front. We're going to turn the ESC so that I've got it upside down. We need this side facing up. We're going to turn the ESC so that these big two copper pads are facing the front, and we're going to put it down and press it down onto the mounting holes. But don't do it yet. I want to show you something. What I want you to see is that if I press this ESC all the way down on the Stax screws, it is touching these metal press nuts that are in the mid plate. That's bad. There's two reasons that's bad. Number one, if the ESC is touching the frame, then when the frame takes a hit, then the ESC could be damaged. But number two, and more importantly, the Stax screws are metal. The ESC is handling large amounts of electricity, and if metal is touching the ESC, the electricity can go where it's not supposed to go, and the whole thing will burn out. Whenever you're building, this build or any build in the future, you always need to make sure that the ESC has a little bit of spacing from the frame so that it doesn't touch the frame or touch any screws or nuts that are sticking up off the bottom plate. The way we're going to handle that, there are various ways you can handle that. The way we're going to handle that is that the ESC comes with a set of extra gummies, okay? And we're going to put the...
Okay, so here we are. We're looking for the extra gummies. It's in the case. There's another bag. It looks like these are capacitors or something. Okay, we're just gonna leave those to the side. But it has some gummies. 2, 3. Oh. Oh. Excuse me, dog. Hey, come on, sit. There we go. That's why I got a blue mat. I saw they had a black one, but I'm like, man, so many of these parts are black. The screws and nuts are black. My desk is black. I'm gonna lose everything. So I got a blue one so I can see everything very easily. All right, so he's putting these gummies down on these Stax screws. Let's see if I can do it this way. So on the screws that are sticking out, not the purple standoffs. So he said this is the front with the little slits, which makes sense. Something like that. There we go. Boom. So that goes there. So that's the front. And then we want to put the power pads towards the front. And now we have tons of clearance. Let's see what he says next. Come on.
Those extra gummies on the screws underneath the ESC. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that we've installed the extra set of gummies underneath the ESC, there's plenty of spacing, maybe even more than we need. I'd say a minimum of 2 millimeters is what you're looking for, and everything is good and isolated and safe. Next, we have to connect the motors to the ESC. Each of the motors has 3 wires, and if you have some familiarity with electronic circuits, you might be thinking that one is positive and one is negative, and put all of that stuff out of your brain. 3-phase brushless motors don't quite work like that. It turns out that the way you connect these 3 wires to the ESC is that the 3 wires are going to go to the 3 pads on the ESC. I want you to think of this ESC as having 3 pads for this motor, 3 pads for this motor, 3 pads for this motor, and 3 pads for this motor. There are 12 pads, there are 4 motors, 3 pads for each motor. And the next question you might have is which wire goes to which pad? And it turns out that it almost doesn't matter. You can connect any of the 3 motor wires to any of the 3 ESC pads. And some of the ways you connect the wires make the motor spin clockwise, and some of the ways you connect the wires make the motor spin counterclockwise. You don't even need to think about this. It's not that it doesn't matter which way the motor spins, it totally does matter. The motors need to spin the right direction, which we'll talk about later what the right direction is. But for now, all we're gonna do is we're gonna lay the wires flat on the arm, and we're just gonna solder the wires to the ESC 1, 2, 3. And it turns out, if that ends up making the motor spin the right direction, fantastic. If it ends up making the motor spin the wrong direction, we can change that later in the process. A useful tidbit of information for you to know is that if you have a motor that is spinning the wrong direction, and you have no other way to change its motor direction, swapping any 2 of the 3 wires with each other will cause the motor to spin the other direction. And sometimes you get in that situation where the easier ways that don't involve resoldering wires aren't available to you. You can always reverse motor by swapping any two of the 3 wires. Now we come to the part of the video that is going to cause a whole lot of people watching this to hit a wall. And I don't say that to discourage you, but just to be realistic about what's going to happen. You see, this here is a soldering iron, and the next thing we need to do is solder wires to the circuit board. If you already know how to solder, great, you're going to do fine. If you have never soldered before, this relatively expensive and fragile piece of electronics is not the place to learn to solder. I have a video which is all about beginner soldering specifically for FPV pilots. And if you don't know how to solder, unfortunately, I know this is not what you want to hear. You need to pause this video. There's a link to my soldering tutorial down in the video description. You need to spend a few hours getting proficient, getting minimally proficient at soldering, so that when you solder on this electronics, you don't end up destroying it. From this point on, I'm going to assume that you've watched that tutorial, you've put in a couple hours of practice, and you're minimally competent at soldering. And I'm going to avoid giving a whole bunch of soldering tips, as tempted as I am to do it. So the first thing we need to do is cut these wires to length, and we're going to do that by laying them flat against the arm.
Okay, I did watch his video several times. I do have practice boards like we discussed in the beginning. I spent some time doing some bigger ones, some round ones, very small ones to super small down here. Had a couple of mess ups, but for the most part got it down. Again, I've soldered before, not a lot, not as a profession, but in general, I've soldered things before, so I have an understanding. I did some practice, maybe an hour or so, and I was able to do it. The practice board did come with some wire, some solder wire. It was all right. I actually think that the 6337 with the flux core was easier to get down and get material bonded good. So what I'm gonna do is I put my quad over here. I'm gonna tin the ESC first using my soldering iron here. I'll tin it, then I'll put it back on the drone. I'll cut the wires to size. I'll tin the wires, strip them back, tin them, and then we'll go ahead and we'll go from there. But I'm not going to record this part. I'm just going to focus on getting the tin on there. Like Bardwell says, he does have a video helping you learn how to solder, get you some practice boards. I got a little 3-pack. I think I don't know, it was $15-20 or something like that, maybe $30. I don't remember, but definitely worth it. I didn't burn anything through. I could see my solders on the back side here because they have holes in them, so I've got good soldering through the back. A couple I messed up on, I could see where I messed up there. But anyway, we're gonna do the ESC. Okay, change the battery. Now we're getting the flight controller. Let's make it easier. Oh, I guess so. Okay, so that's the front. There's a little arrow right there. And then we need to connect that plug and that plug. And it comes with a bunch of wires. Oh, we got a real short one. There's some gummies.
Of the multi-rotor. You don't have to do it that way. If for some reason you needed to not make it face that way, there is a way to configure the flight controller to know that it's not facing front. But by default, it expects to be facing the front of the quadcopter, and if it isn't, then when you try to fly it, it won't fly right. It won't fly at all. It'll just freak out and flip over. So we're going to identify the front of the aircraft, which is got these two little slits for the camera plates, and of course the ESC, the XT60 is coming out the front, and we're going to line that up with the front facing arrow on the flight controller. We're also going to get these wires that come with the flight controller, and they're going to connect the ESC to the flight controller. The plug on the flight controller that goes to the ESC is this one, and there's only one plug on the ESC. That's how they're going to get connected together. And you can see that those two plugs are very close together, so we can use the short one of these wires to connect them. As you plug this in, bear in mind that there are you can see these little tabs right here that only let it go in one way. You can force it in the wrong way, but if it seems like there's resistance, don't force it, just flip it over, and that may fix it. Once it's plugged in, we can do the same thing for the ESC. Plug that in. There we go. And then what I like to do is just give them a couple on the flight controller. We're also going to get these wires that come with the flight controller, and they're going to connect the ESC to the flight controller. The plug on the flight controller that goes to the ESC is this one, and there's only one plug on the ESC. That's how they're going to get connected together. And you can see that those two plugs are very close together, so we can use the short one of these wires to connect them. As you plug this in, bear in mind that there are you can see these little tabs right here that only let it go in one way. You can force it in the wrong way, but if it seems like there's resistance, don't force it, just flip it over, and that may fix it. Once it's plugged in, we can do the same thing for the ESC. Plug that in. There we go. And then what I like to do is just give them a couple gentle twists to take the slack out. It's not mandatory, but I think it helps keep things neat. Don't over twist it and put tension on it though. And the result will look something like this. A note about connecting ESCs to flight controllers. In this case, the ESC and the flight controller are both manufactured by the same company, and they're made to go together. And what that means is that you can assume that the wire going between them will work. But if you have ESCs and flight controllers made by different manufacturers for some reason, you cannot assume that the plugs between them are compatible. The order of the pins in those plugs is not standardized between manufacturers. And if you have a wire, I'll see you there. As a reminder, there's a playlist in the video description with all the videos in this series, and This video is part of a series where we build an entire FPV drone from start to finish. So if it feels like you're in the middle of a conversation that you missed the start of, that's why. If you're here for the information in this specific video, keep watching. But if you want to find out the full context for what's going on here, there's a link in the video description to the full playlist, and you might need to go back and start with video number 1. At this point in the build, I like to do what I call a smoke check. We're going to do a basic test with a multimeter to make sure that we haven't made any gross mistakes in wiring this up, and then we are going to apply power and see if anything blows off. And the idea is that we haven't quite finished the build yet, but we've done most of the place.
I have to go get my multimeter. Okay, so he had us use a multimeter. Put it on the Wi-Fi, and we should hear nothing. If we put this to the positive, this to the negative, should be nothing. If we reverse it, put this to the negative, one little beep is okay, but a constant tone is not. If we put ground, that's good. If we put this to positive, should be the second one. All right. So that's good. Then get our smoke stopper. Put that in. Get our battery. Looks like we're good to go. Soldering came out good. Jesus. Fucking snug. Okay, this go back in here. It's not something I use every day. Tell you what, that was a good, I don't know, I think it was like $12 or some shit. Okay, so this is now where we're gonna go to, I believe, video. So I have that. Got some gummies. And possibly our radio. Okay.
You're using. The next couple videos in the playlist are going to say analog only, DJI 03 only, or walk snail only, and you are going to, well, you can watch all of them if you want to, but you're only going to follow along with the video that pertains to the type of video transmitter that you are using. After you finish that, you will then proceed with the rest of the playlist.
Without the ones like you working tirelessly to keep things running, everything would suddenly stop.
So in his, he showed he had to plug this in, right? Mine already came plugged in, and he wanted to put it between the ESC and the flight controller. So I just lifted this up, put the wire there, put it back down because there's nothing holding it. I don't know if we're supposed to have something holding it by now. Yeah, I don't know.
The concern that I slightly have is that these.
But then I had to put the antenna in, right? So I could just. Okay, don't seat the antenna all the way, right? Because it might have to be turned around or whatever. So before you put those, I'm guessing whatever he's going to show us, but I just had to get it out. It fits in there snug in that 3D print. So leave it loose for now, put it in your bar like he says, and I'm gonna figure out how that gets attached. That was not easy. It's not hard. That's the way it was. It's not hard, but the lack of knowledge doesn't make it easy. We're about to go do the maiden flight. I did run it outside just to make sure it pitched and rolled and yawed and did what it's supposed to do. But this is the first flight. Let's go do it.